I kissed my brother, and now my fiancé wants to break up with me since he finds it weird. I never thought something so simple could ruin my relationship. I never imagined that showing love to my own brother would make my fiancé want to leave me. But here I am, questioning everything, wondering if I did something wrong, or if people just see things differently. I have always been close to my younger brother. He is only 17, and I have seen him grow up from a small kid running around the house to a smart teenager working hard in school. To me, he is still the little boy who held my hand whenever he was scared, the one who ran to me whenever he needed comfort. I feel responsible for him, like it's my job to protect him from anything that might hurt him. Our way of showing love has always been through physical touch. We hug a lot, sometimes cuddle while watching movies, and he often rests his head on my lap when he is tired. It has always been this way. It's not weird to us. It's just how we are. My fiancé, on the other hand, has always acted a little strange about it. We have been together for 3 years, and he knows how much I love my brother. But whenever he saw us hugging or sitting close, he would make comments like, "You guys sure are close," or "Whoa there." I always thought he was joking, so I never took it seriously. I just laughed it off or rolled my eyes. I never thought he truly had a problem with it. But now, everything is falling apart because of one simple thing: a kiss on the cheek. Something I've done 100 times before, something that to me is as normal as saying goodnight. But to him, it was something else entirely. When I met my fiancé, everything felt perfect. He was kind, funny, and always made me feel special. We had been together for 3 years, and during that time, I truly believed he understood me. He knew about my past, my family, and most importantly, my bond with my younger brother. I never thought it would become a problem between us. A year ago, I moved in with him. It was a big step for me, leaving my family home and adjusting to a new life in a different city. I missed my mother, and I missed my brother even more. Before moving, we used to spend time together almost every day. He would come into my room just to talk, share things about school, and ask for advice. Sometimes we would just sit together quietly, and that was enough. After I moved, all of that changed. We still talked over video calls, but it wasn't the same. I could see that he was struggling, but there was only so much I could do from far away. My fiancé knew how much I missed my brother. I talked about him often, sometimes even showing him the texts or silly pictures my brother would send me. Whenever I spoke about him, I felt happy, but I noticed something in my fiancé's expression, something I couldn't quite understand at the time. At first, it was just small comments. Whenever I visited home and hugged my brother, my fiancé would make a remark like, wow, you guys are really close." It didn't seem like a big deal. Some people aren't very affectionate with their siblings, so I assumed he just wasn't used to it. I would laugh it off or ignore it. I thought he was joking. But as time passed, his comments started to feel different. There were moments when he seemed uncomfortable when I showed affection to my brother. If my brother leaned on my shoulder or sat next to me for too long, my fiancé would give me a strange look. He never said anything outright, but his tone changed. I remember one time when we were all sitting in the living room, and my brother rested his head on my lap like he used to when we lived together. My fiancé just stared. Later that night, he told me, "I don't know, it just seems weird." I didn't know what to say. To me, it wasn't weird at all. It was just the way we had always been. I grew up taking care of my brother, especially after my father left. Our childhood wasn't easy. My father was abusive, toward my mother, toward me, and even toward my brother. I saw firsthand how much pain my little brother went through, how scared he was. I promised myself that I would always be there for him no matter what. Maybe that's why I am so protective of him. Maybe that's why our bond is stronger than what some people consider normal. But my fiancé never understood that. He grew up as an only child. He never had a sibling to share a deep connection with. Maybe that's why he found it odd, but I never thought it was something serious. I thought he would just get used to it over time. Looking back, I realize I ignored the signs. The small jokes, the passing comments, the way he looked at me when I was around my brother. I brushed it all off because I believed that he loved me and that he wouldn't judge me for something so innocent. I wish I had talked to him about it sooner. Maybe then, none of this would have happened. Maybe then, he wouldn't be so disgusted by me now. It had been 4 months since I last saw my family in person. Moving to a different city with my fiancé meant I could only visit once in a while, and with how busy life had been, time just flew by. When my mother's birthday came around, I was excited. Finally, a chance to go home, to be with my family again, even if it was just for a short time. My fiancé and I made the trip together. It was a small gathering with close relatives, nothing fancy, just good food, laughter, and catching up. My mother was happy, my brother seemed fine, and everything felt warm and familiar again. I missed this. That night, after all the guests left, my fiancé and I sat in the living room, watching a movie before bed. It was nice, just the two of us relaxing after a long day. Then there was a soft knock on the door. It was my brother. He peeked inside and hesitated for a moment before asking if we could talk. I saw the way my fiancé looked at me, half amused, half annoyed, but I ignored it. My brother rarely asked for things like this, and I could tell something was wrong. So I got up and followed him to his room. As soon as we sat down, he let everything out. School had been tough, his studies were overwhelming, and the pressure of being a top student was getting to him. But what hurt him the most was his friends. They had started treating him differently, pushing him away, saying things that made him feel like he didn't belong. I could hear the frustration and sadness in his voice, and then he broke down crying. Seeing him like that, so vulnerable, hurt me. He had always been strong, always pushing himself, but he was still just a kid. I wrapped my arms around him and let him cry. I told him it was okay, that he wasn't alone, that things would get better. I had always been the one to comfort him, and this was no different. Then the door swung open. My fiancé stood there, arms crossed, his face unreadable. "Are you guys done?" he asked, his voice sharp, almost irritated. I looked at him, confused by his tone. "Just a few more minutes," I said. He didn't say anything else, just turned and left. I stayed with my brother a little longer, reassuring him that we could talk more in the morning. Before leaving, I kissed him on the cheek, something I had done countless times since he was a baby, and told him to get some rest. I didn't think much of it. It was just a normal moment between siblings. But when I walked back into the room with my fiancé, I realized something had shifted. The air was heavy, his face was tense, and before I could even sit down, he exploded. As soon as I stepped into the room, I could feel it. Something was wrong. My fiancé sat on the edge of the bed, arms crossed, jaw clenched. His eyes, usually warm, were cold and filled with something I couldn't quite understand. Anger, disgust, maybe both. I barely had a chance to sit down before he spoke. "What the hell was that?" His voice was sharp, almost accusing. I blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" He scoffed, shaking his head like he couldn't believe I was asking. "You just kissed your brother, on the cheek." I frowned. "So? I've always done that." His face twisted, and I could see the frustration bubbling up. "That's the problem. You hug him, you cuddle with him, he lays on your lap, and now you're kissing him?" He let out a harsh laugh. "That's not normal." I stared at him, completely caught off guard. He was upset, he was crying. I was comforting him. He stood up suddenly, running a hand through his hair. "Do you even hear yourself? You act like he's your boyfriend, not your brother." His voice was louder now, filled with something raw. My stomach twisted. "That's not true. He's my little brother, and I love him, but not in the way you're thinking." He shook his head, pacing the room. "I don't know how you don't see it. The way you touch him, the way you act around him. It's weird. It makes me uncomfortable." I felt a lump forming in my throat. I had never seen him like this before. "You're making it sound like something it's not," I said, my voice quieter now. "He needed me, and I was there for him. That's all." His eyes locked onto mine. "Number, that's not all. You guys are too close. It's not normal for siblings to be like this." He let out a breath, shaking his head. "I don't think I can do this anymore." My heart stopped for a second. "Do what?" He sighed, looking away. "Us. This relationship. I can't be with someone who doesn't see how wrong this is." Panic started creeping in. "You're breaking up with me? Over this?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But I know that what I saw tonight made me sick, and I don't want to feel that way about the person I'm supposed to marry." Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "So, you think I'm disgusting?" He hesitated. I don't understand you, and I don't think I ever will." For the first time in 3 years, I felt a wall between us, one that might never come down. I felt my whole body go cold. My fiancé stood in front of me, looking at me like I was a stranger, like he had just discovered something awful about me. My mind raced, trying to make sense of his words. He thought my relationship with my brother was wrong, that I had crossed some invisible line. But how? How could he not see that this was just love, the same love I had always given, the same love my brother had always needed? I took a shaky breath, trying to stay calm. "You don't understand," I said softly. "You weren't there. You don't know what we went through." He crossed his arms, his face still hard. "What does that have to do with anything?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Our father was abusive. He hurt us, physically, emotionally. He hurt my mom, too. We spent years living in fear, walking on eggshells, waiting for the next time he would explode. My brother was just a little kid when it was the worst. He would hide in my room at night, crying, shaking, and I was the only one who could calm him down." I could see something flicker in my fiancé's eyes, maybe surprise, maybe doubt, but he didn't say anything. "I protected him," I continued. "I held him when he was scared, wiped his tears when no one else did. I promised him he would always be safe with me. That's why we're close. That's why I still see him as my baby brother, even though he's growing up." My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. "He's not just my brother. He's a kid who went through hell and still carries the weight of it. And if hugging him, if kissing him on the cheek, if being there for him makes you uncomfortable, then maybe you never understood me at all." My fiancé ran a hand through his hair, looking away. "I get that you had a tough childhood," he muttered, "but that doesn't mean this is normal." His words hit me harder than I expected. I had just poured my heart out, tried to explain why I was the way I was, and all he could say was, "It's not normal." I felt something shift inside me, something painful, something final. Maybe he would never understand. Maybe no matter what I said, he would always see my love for my brother as something twisted, something wrong. I took a step back, suddenly feeling exhausted. "If you really think I'm disgusting," I said quietly, "then maybe we shouldn't be together." He didn't respond right away. He just stood there staring at the floor, as if searching for an answer he didn't have, and in that moment I realized I might have already lost him. The next morning I woke up to an empty bed. My fiancé was gone. For a brief second I thought maybe he had just gone downstairs, but when I checked my phone I saw a message from him. I called my mom. "I need to talk to her. We'll talk later." My stomach dropped. He called his mom. That could only mean one thing. He was serious about breaking up. I sat there for a moment, staring at the screen, my mind still foggy from sleep. I had hoped that after a night of cooling off, he would see how ridiculous this all was, that he would realize I wasn't some kind of freak just because I showed affection to my brother. But instead, he had gone to the one person who always had an influence over him, his mother. I got up and found him sitting in the living room, phone still in his hand. He barely looked at me. "I told her everything," he said, voice flat. "She agrees with me." I felt my chest tighten. "Agrees with what?" "That what you're doing isn't right," he said simply. "She said if we want to make this work, you need to stay away from your brother." I stared at him, completely shocked. "Stay away from my brother? Are you serious?" "She thinks it's the only way," he continued, still not looking at me. "She said that I'm not used to seeing siblings act like this because I grew up as an only child, that it's affecting me mentally." He finally looked at me then, and for the first time I saw something other than anger in his eyes. He looked conflicted. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "So, what? You want me to stop talking to my brother? Stop hugging him? Pretend like we don't have a bond just because it makes you uncomfortable?" He sighed. "I don't know, but I do know that I can't live the rest of my life feeling this way." His words stung. This wasn't just about last night. This had been building up inside him for a long time, and I had been too blind to see it. "You're really willing to throw everything away over this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated. "I don't want to, but I also don't think I can marry someone who doesn't see this as a problem." I felt like I was sinking. This was a man I had planned to spend my life with, a man I had trusted, loved, and built a future with. And now, because of something so innocent, so normal to me, he was ready to walk away. Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "Then maybe you're right," I said quietly. "Maybe we shouldn't get married." He didn't respond, and in that silence I knew I had already lost him. I sat alone in my childhood bedroom, staring at the walls that once made me feel safe. But now, they felt smaller, closing in on me. My fiancé was downstairs avoiding me. My mind was spinning, replaying every word he had said the night before, trying to make sense of it all. Was I really doing something wrong? Was I the problem? I had never questioned my relationship with my brother before. It had always been so simple. He was my little brother, and I loved him. I hugged him when he was sad, held him when he needed comfort, kissed his forehead like I had since he was a child. But now, the man I was supposed to marry was telling me it wasn't normal, that it was wrong. I felt sick. I didn't want to believe it, but his words had planted a seed of doubt in my mind. What if people had always thought this way about us? What if they looked at us and saw something inappropriate instead of something pure? Had I been blind to it all this time? I pulled my knees to my chest, wrapping my arms around myself as if I could protect myself from my own thoughts. I loved my fiancé, but I also loved my brother. How was I supposed to choose? My fiancé wanted me to distance myself, to change the way I treated my brother. But how could I do that? How could I look my little brother in the eyes and tell him that from now on, things had to be different? That the love and comfort he had always known were suddenly wrong? He had already been through so much. I couldn't be another person who made him feel abandoned. And yet, if I didn't change, I would lose my fiancé. He had made that clear. Tears welled up in my eyes as the weight of it all crushed me. I had always thought love was supposed to be simple, but here I was, torn between two people I cared about, forced to prove that my love for one didn't take away from the other. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake my fiancé and make him understand. Make him see that my love for my brother wasn't romantic, wasn't wrong. But no matter how much I tried, he saw it differently. And I didn't know if I could ever change his mind. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, but the answer didn't come. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who was right. All I knew was that no matter what choice I made, someone I loved would end up hurt. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone, my fingers hovering over the screen. My thoughts were all over the place, tangled in confusion, doubt, and hurt. No matter how many times I replayed everything in my head, I couldn't find a clear answer. Was I really wrong? I had never thought twice about the way I treated my brother. It was natural, instinctive. I had spent years protecting him, comforting him, being the person he could always rely on. But now, for the first time, I wondered if the rest of the world saw it differently. My fiancé had made up his mind. In his eyes, our relationship was strange, inappropriate, something to be ashamed of. He saw something wrong where I only saw love. And the worst part? He wasn't alone. His mother agreed with him. Maybe others would too. What if I had been blind to this all along? What if people around us had been thinking the same thing but were too polite to say it? I hated myself for even questioning it. I didn't want to change how I loved my brother. I didn't want to start treating him like a stranger just because someone else thought it was weird. But at the same time, I didn't want to lose my fiancé either. I had spent years building a life with him. He was the person I thought I would marry, the person I thought understood me better than anyone. But now, it felt like he didn't know me at all. Or worse, maybe I didn't know him. I didn't know what to do. I felt like no matter what I chose, I would be wrong in someone's eyes. If I stayed the same, I would lose my fiancé. If I changed, I would lose a part of myself. And worst of all, I would hurt my brother in a way he wouldn't understand. I couldn't bear the thought of sitting him down and telling him, "Sorry, I can't hug you anymore. I can't be there for you like I used to because someone else doesn't like it." How could I do that? How could I make him feel like he was asking for something wrong when all he ever wanted was the love and comfort he had always known? Tears burned in my eyes as I took a deep breath. I had no answers, no solutions. So here I was, typing out my story, sending it into the world, hoping that maybe someone somewhere could tell me the truth. Was I really wrong? Was I really the problem? Or was I just being asked to change something that was never broken in the first place?